dress them. Thank you. We'll dress them at the end of our session today. And guess what? It's recording. So I hope you guys got that notification too. Um, and if you would like, you may turn your cameras on. It's not required. If you are comfortable having your camera on, that's great. If you're not camera ready, that's totally fine too. You can just turn your video camera off. So my name is Dr. Sam Fessich. I am an instructor at Slippery Rock University in Pennsylvania. We have a wonderful education program, and I teach in the curriculum instruction and educational leadership department. And I get to work with sophomores and freshmen students, and then I also get to oversee our student teachers. So I love seeing students grow from their freshman year all the way up to being a student teacher. And my student teachers start next week. So I've been getting some emails like, oh no, can you help me out? I'm feeling a little nervous. So I am right there with you. And I have experience supervising student teachers for the past 10 years at a previous institution. I'm also the author of EduMagic, a guide for pre-service teachers, and EduMagic Shine On, a guide for new teachers. I also co-authored a book called Crush It from the Start, 50 Tips for New Teachers, and all of those are available on Amazon if you would like to check them out. And I'm the host of the EduMagic podcast, the podcast just for future teachers, because there's not much out there just for future educators. So I like to focus in on that group of teachers and help support you. You can find my work over on sfessage.com, and you can follow me over on Instagram. If you want to continue our conversation from tonight, you can find me at sfessage, and I am happy to help support you in the DMs or whatever you would like to do. You can also check out my funny reels. I've been posting some recently about supervision. So I love connecting with people over on Instagram. So let's go ahead and hop into our chat, get our typing fingers ready. I would love for you to share, when do you student teach? Is it spring 25? Do you start tomorrow? Do you start on the 21st? Maybe you student teach in the fall. And then if you are student teaching this semester, what grade, subject area are you student teaching in? And I'll leave that up while I open up our chat here. I'm just going to scoot the chat over just a little bit so I can see our responses. All right. Great to have everybody here. So we have Madeline, who's starting on the 28th in second grade. We have Savia, starting in fall 25 in high school math. The fall 25 with Kayla. And let's see, Leilani is K-5 starting in September. Caitlin and Sabrina. Wow, somebody started on January 6th. Oh my goodness, that's awesome. Wonderful. Oh, great. Start next week. Social studies, begin pre-student teaching. Wow, so much great stuff going on. Fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. All right. Let's keep going here. And if you would like to continue on in the chat, you can. I have there we go. I'm going to go ahead and minimize that chat. There we go. Okay, let's keep going here. There we go. Okay, so here's our agenda. So tonight we're talking about how to stand out during student teaching, how to communicate with your co-op, because it can get a little awkward, right? Like you've never met this person before and you have to email them. What are you going to say? We're going to also talk about how to communicate those expectations you have for yourself as a student teacher in a professional way, and what are some goals to communicate that to your college supervisor and your cooperating teacher. Talking about building relationships with students, colleagues, and support staff, lesson planning, and how to kind of plan that out with your co-op so you can meet the requirements of student teaching, and then effectively co-planning with your mentor teacher or with your cooperating teacher. Now, let's go ahead and talk about some terminology. So student teachers, what you are, you're going into a mentor teacher or a cooperating teacher's classroom, second grade, third grade, high school teacher. That is your mentor or your cooperating teacher. Then you also have another person in the mix, which is your university or college supervisor, where they come in and they observe you teaching. It depends on your university how often they observe you teaching. But that would be something you would discuss with your university supervisor. So three kind of terminology pieces that we'll talk about throughout tonight's session. So if you are a fan of Gary Brooks, he always says seriously. And for some of you, might be thinking, oh my gosh, am I ready for student teaching? Is this something that I want to be able to do with the for the rest of my life? And seriously, yes, you are so ready to be a student teacher. You've done all the coursework, you've passed all the tests. Um, you passed all the tests, you've done the observations, you've done the field work. You absolutely can do this. This is more than likely a culminating activity or experience for you end of your senior year. So, I mean, it's going to test you in so many different ways. It's going to test you emotionally, mentally, physically, but you've done everything up until this point to get here. And if you weren't ready, you would not be going into student teaching. That you would have some sort of intervention going on. So please note that if you are ready, if you are going to student teach tomorrow or on the 28th, or hey, you already started on the 6th, you are ready to go and you absolutely can do this. So try to think about not just doing this for the A or to pass student teaching, but really dive into this experience as a student teacher. This is the only time that you're going to have another certified educator in the classroom with you who has your back. This is where you can take risks, make mistakes, get messy, kind of like how Miss Frizzle says, you know, on Magic School Bus. So take those chances, take risks, try different things. So, in short answer, yes, you are ready for student teaching. All of your concerns and worries, stress, this is all completely normal before student teaching time. So, thinking about how you can continue to explore those concentration areas, how you can continue to explore those standards, those instructional strategies you learn about in your methods courses. Try out some things in field experience. Just this is a great time to try new things and to get feedback from your cooperating teacher and from your college supervisor. I want to highlight this last part here on the presentation. You're not expected to be perfect on your first day. You're not expected to be perfect on your first week, 8th week, 16th week. No one is expected to be perfect during student teaching. This is student teaching. You're still learning, and that's okay. As long as we see growth in different areas of planning, instruction, assessment, engagement, and professional responsibilities, you are growing and glowing. That's what we're looking for in student teaching. So I'm going to go ahead and drop down in the chat how you're feeling. What are some things that you're feeling regarding student teaching? I love how Marissa puts here in the chat. I probably won't student teach for another 3 years, but it's never too early to learn about. Absolutely agree, Marissa. And honestly, I think some of these tips will help you as you experience your different field experiences and different levels. Yay, Caleb, I'm excited that you're excited. That's a wonderful way to feel about student teaching. Yes, it's a very exciting time. Excited and nervous, a nice mixture of those completely normal. Nervous, that's okay. That's okay. Excited slash nervous. Yeah. And you're gonna have days in student teaching, friends, where your face hurts from smiling so much, and you're gonna have days where you're crying in your car and everything in between. And all of it is to be expected. Oh, I like that, Amanda, that you long-term subbed before. Great. So before we jump into the next part of our presentation, I want you to think about, reflect on your latest experience with students, whether it was like a field experience or maybe you did some long-term sub or day-to-day subbing. What are some areas that you want to grow in during this student teaching experience? So I'll go ahead and type that in the chat just in case my audio went out. So thinking about your most recent experience, I'll put classroom experience. What are some areas you want to grow in during student teaching? How to control the class, especially with larger classrooms, classroom management, behavior management, classroom management, building rapport. Okay, yeah, these are all great areas. You know, a lot of student teachers struggle in because it's not your classroom. You're taking over the expectations, the policies, procedures of your host teacher, your cooperating teacher, and you need to carry those out because when you leave after 8 weeks or 16 weeks, they need to continue on. So that's a tough area. But when you're thinking about classroom management, um, and managing student behaviors, thinking about what can you bring into your classroom whenever you're teaching, when you're the teacher of record, and what do you kind of want to not bring into your classroom. Those would be some things to reflect upon. Want to feel comfortable managing the classroom. Yeah, and these are all things that you're going to get experience with. I recommend starting off small and then working your way up in classroom management. So starting with small group and then moving into a large group. Maybe trying, if you're in a high school or a middle school classroom and you're teaching two sections of the same class, try out one section and then maybe watch and observe and watch your cooperating teacher model the next section and reflect and see, okay, what are some differences that the teacher did than what I did whenever I taught the class. Okay. Oops, sorry. All right. So some things to do before we start our placement. Now I know one of you started on the 6th, so I'm sorry, this is a little late. But for those of you who are starting on the 28th or later on, thinking about some ways to make you stand out. You want to make sure that you email your cooperating teacher. And I have a cooperating teacher email checklist. Maybe someone can grab that link and pop it in the chat. If not, I can grab it at the end of our session. And in that checklist, it talks to you about, okay, here's some things that you're going to want to mention in your email, your intro email to your cooperating teacher. It gives you some talking points because it can be nerve-wracking to kind of write this email to somebody you've never met before. So it talks about some ways to really share your story, why you want to be a teacher, setting up that open communication with them. Like if you're able to come in before your student teaching placement starts and going to observe, that's awesome. And if you can make those arrangements, perfect. If not, that's okay. That's okay. Just making sure that you have that open communication. Also in that email template, it talks about some ways to ask some important questions that we may not think about, like where do I park? What time? Like, what's the scheduled time that I need to be there? Those types of things. So thinking about like some nitty gritty details that we might not think about until maybe the Sunday night before we leave. Oh my gosh, where do I park? And what if it's a 2-hour delay? What do I do then? So lots of different things to be thinking about in that email. Making sure you share your contact information, preferred email address. Like if you don't check your university one often, maybe you want to share your Gmail because you have that on your phone or whatever, your cell phone number. And if you're comfortable sharing with your cooperating teacher, and this also might be something with your university, sharing an emergency contact information whenever you get to your placements, your cooperating teacher has emergency contact information. And then make sure you have a professional signature at the end of your email. You just don't want it to have your name. You would want to have like senior student teacher, if you're involved in any clubs or organizations, those types of things. So having a professional email. Some other ideas to think about when you're writing that email, don't put the teacher's email in right away, put it in draft mode, reread it, read it again, pop it into Grammarly, whatever you need to do to make sure that grammar is spot on. And then going ahead and adding in their email address, making sure that you have that spell check, and then sending it from your university email because you don't want it to get kicked back out or maybe caught into a spam folder or a junk folder. So making sure that it's a professional presence there. And then if you can, if you're writing it out like at 10 o'clock at night, click schedule send to send at 8 a.m. Don't send it at 10 o'clock at night. Make sure you're sending it during those school hours. So you can do that on whatever email carrier you have. You can do a schedule send and it'll send it out at a certain time and date. So you can work on it before and then send it out later. Okay, so let's talk about meeting our co-op for the first time. So you just walked in the building, maybe you shook your co-op's hand. Now what do you do? So it can get maybe a little awkward if you've never met this person before. Maybe you've had a field with them. You can start to draw upon that experience. So describing these are in no particular order, but thinking about classroom management strategies. What are some techniques that the teacher uses to support students in learning? What are some transitions that they use? Do they use like a call and response or a transition song? Those types of things. So thinking about what are some ways classroom management policy and procedures, how they implement that into their classroom. For some schools, you might have to submit your clearances when you go into the student teach. That would be hopefully be something you know ahead of time. Maybe that's something you'd want to put into the email if you haven't already sent your clearances, but I do not recommend emailing your clearances to your cooperating teacher because it has identifiable information. So if you want to take copies, like hard copies, into the district office or into the front office, if they need those, they would have access to that. But do not email your clearances because there's very sensitive information there. You would also want to go in and maybe talk about and discuss with the teacher any adaptations, modifications for students, thinking about differentiation. And then thinking about if you're able to get a copy of the student teacher handbook from your college or university, and if there's a copy of the faculty handbook or the cooperating teacher handbook for student teachers, that could also be something that you can provide the cooperating teachers so they have all the information that they need, in addition to a student teacher handbook or a faculty or mentor teacher handbook type thing. So if they need that, you can have access to that information. All right, I'm going to go ahead and scroll up. It looks like we have something in the chat. Oh, Matt, I don't think you can include too much information. I think it just shows that you're being thorough in the email that you're sending to your cooperating teacher. The big thing there is just make sure that you, before you click send, or that you, before you click send, that you read it over, check for those grammar mistakes. All right, so another big area besides, what do I even talk to my cooperating teacher about is how do I get organized? I'm getting some of those questions this week from my student teachers. And I recommend, getting a planner. I know it sounds old school, but having a three-ring binder that you can put all your stuff in, because when you're student teaching, you're going to get so many resources sent to you either through email or your co-op, like, oh, here, take an extra copy. Like, oh, great. Where are we gonna put this? Well, having a planner or a binder, a three-ring binder could really help with this. So you can have a spot in your planner or your binder that has information for all your lesson plans. And as a supervisor, when I come in to observe my student teachers, I love to see their planner opened up to what lesson I'm observing. So I don't have to flip through everything, and I can clearly see, okay, here are their objectives, here are the standards, here's their procedure, here's their assessment and reflection. So I can follow along with that plan as they're teaching that lesson. So having spots for lesson plans, having spots for your college supervisor evaluation. So when you get feedback from your supervisor, you can pop that right into there. Same as you get feedback from your cooperating teacher, put it right into your planner and your binder. That way you can go ahead and you can look through, okay, what are some areas that I did well? What are some areas I need to do a little bit better? And next time I were to teach this class or teach this topic. Have a calendar and not just like all the months like on one page. Have a monthly calendar, a weekly, daily. Go in and research the school district's calendar and your college or university calendar in case you need to be on campus for certain days, in case you need to go in for practicum. It all kind of varies based on your college or university if you need to go to the college or not during student teaching. But you're going to want to put in those important days on the monthly view of your calendar and on the weekly and daily, so you don't miss anything and you don't forget to show up to a meeting. You're also going to want to look at the school district calendar and look to see when are the days off. And this is also a good time to talk to the cooperating teacher and ask, what do we do if there's a 2-hour delay? What do we do if there's a remote learning day? These are some good questions to ask so you're prepared for that as well. Another thing to do to get organized in your student teacher planner is to have a list of any modifications or adaptations that you need to make to lessons. Do not put specific diagnoses on there, but put hey, I need to make sure I have a large font. I need to make sure I have contrast, like a yellow background with black font, something like that. So you have notes of that when you're planning out your lessons. And then thinking about organizing in other ways for student teaching would be going through We know you have them, your Pinterest boards, your bookmarks, whatever you have saved all of your student teaching or great teaching ideas to, start to organize them. Maybe think about them as buckets of content. So I like to think of things in the Danielson framework. Here are my pins or my bookmarks related to planning and prep, instruction, engagement, professional responsibilities. And I kind of have these big buckets of content that I can then sort through. So organize all your content. Review notes from your classes. So if you're teaching a class where you had a methods course in, go ahead and review those notes from your classes. If you have an instructional strategies course, you can go ahead and review those notes. What are some instructional strategies I learned about? What if there's more than just the think, pair, share? Thinking about how you can group students, thinking about how you can organize the classroom space to maximize learning. And then get your OneDrive or your Google Drive ready to go with all kinds of folders. So maybe you want to have folders in Google Drive, ones like student teaching spring 25, and then you have all the classes that your student teaching in, and then you can put in resources there. And as your co-op sends you stuff, you can pop in those resources right into those folders. So it's already organized and ready to go for you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and check the chat. Let's see. I love it. This is great. Okay, let's keep going. All right, so let's talk about that first week. For a lot of you, that is coming up or that's already happened. So we want to make sure that we're not just being creepers in the back of the classroom, that we're actually engaged. And a great way to kind of start that conversation with our co-op is to say something along the lines of, what are some ways I can support students today? Or what are some ways I can get involved with students today? That's a nice way to phrase, hey, I want to help. Let me help. So you want to make sure that you're engaged. Maybe you're up and walking around. You're just not in the back, writing notes. You want to make sure your cell phone is put away on silent in your bag. Do not take it out. It's professionalism. Just keep it in the bag. You can check it at lunch. You can check it at the end of the day. Maybe think about some ways you can have a conversation with your co-op about taking the lead in certain areas. So if you're in elementary, maybe thinking about, can I like observing morning meeting and modeling morning meeting, and then maybe on the 5th day or the 2nd week, that's something you could start taking with a small group. It's low risk. It's something that they do every day. It's very much a routine. And by January, February, they have it down pat. So helping in that area. If students are in small group or one-on-one instruction, see if you can help support there. So just find little ways that you can engage with students during your time at the first week. I know it's a lot of observation, and during that observation, it can be really daunting just sitting there with a blank page. Like, what am I supposed to be looking at? What do I jot down? So thinking about and reflecting upon routine, policies, procedures, seeing if you can observe other teachers, because you're going to find a great strategy from teachers down the hall. So if say you want to look into a reading specialist or a math specialist, going and observing them would be kind of cool. It doesn't have to be for an entire day, it can just be for a class period. Maybe you even ask your cooperating teacher who is really good at using technology in the classroom, who is really good at building student rapport. I'd like to go observe them for a class period. So making sure that you're kind of getting out there and connecting with others in the building, that also looks really good. Looking at the different routines and procedures that are built into the classroom. So how do students enter the classroom? How do they exit? Where do they get their materials? Is it all under their desk in a pencil box, or do they have to go? Is it in the center of a group of desks? What's the policy for them going to the restroom or going to counseling or going to the nurse or whatever that might be? What's that policy? So be looking and documenting and jotting down, here are the different policies within this classroom, because you want to make sure whenever it's your turn in front of the students that you know those policies and procedures, so they can't pull one over on you, right? You want to make sure that you have that information and you know what's expected. And then discussing that with your cooperating teacher. Today, I noticed a policy for students going to the restroom. So they have to sign out first. or do they just raise their hand? How many students do you let go at a time? Having those conversations as well. Conversations are pretty important. You also want to make sure that you are curious and you show initiative throughout your placement. That's going to go such a long way. So whether that is like volunteering after school, like with a reading buddies program, or volunteering, maybe you're in an elementary placement, but the middle and high school has like a STEM robotics team, and that's really interesting to you. See if you can volunteer there. Get involved in some way, or maybe they're having a book fair. Can you volunteer to run the cash register for that? Just be present, and if you maximize the time at that placement. According to your university, they'll let you know like what PD days or professional development days you need to attend. For some of you, it's going to be I need to attend. You need to go to all the PD days that are at the school. For others, it's not. So that's going to depend on what your cooperating teacher, student teacher, supervisor, and university policy is regarding professional development days. Or here in Pennsylvania, they're called Act 80 days, or just the teachers come to school. So some of it might be relevant to you, some of it might not. If you're told you don't have to go to a PD day, don't just use that as like oh, I get to sleep in, go to Starbucks. I mean, that's great. You can still do those things, but you also want to say, what else can I do in the meantime to help support you? Can I help grade this? Can I help create this? Can I help develop our next anchor chart, or whatever that might be? So how can I help support you? You're on a PD day. I want to help you, even though I'm not attending. What can I do to help support you? And then showing up to your student events. They notice when you are there. I had a student teacher who taught secondary math, and he had a lot of students who were in the musical. He's student taught in the spring, and that's a great time for high school musicals. Well, here in PA, it's a great time for high school musicals. And he went to the musical, and his student teacher, or his students that he was in his class that he was student teaching, and they noticed like, oh my gosh, Mr. Nate came to my musical, and he was able to talk to them about it on Monday, and they thought that they were rock stars, and they thought he was a rock star for coming. It was so cool, because not only are you seeing your students up on stage and you're seeing them in their element and being excellent, and just enjoying the experience, but you're also seeing students who came to support them, like, oh, that's my student teacher, and they shared to their parents or whatever. So it's a really fun way to show up and to be involved by going to their events and attending their games, or whatever it might be. And in the example, it was a musical. All right, another way to stand out during teaching experience. I know this one's very basic, but please, please, please dress professionally. I know, we show up to college classes a little bit differently than we would to a field or a student teaching experience. So dressing professionally, checking out your outfit in the mirror before you head out there, making sure there's it's professional, and nothing showing that shouldn't be showing. Being punctual, arriving on time. I have a colleague who says, if you're on time, then you're late. So you want to make sure that you arrive. I like to arrive 15 minutes early. To this Zoom call, we were a half hour early. So arriving on time, but if you can be a little early, that's always great. So you're going to want to follow your teacher's schedule. If your teacher comes in at 7:30, you come in at 7:15, 7:30. Between then, you want to make sure you're showing up before students get there. You're going to be rolling in when students are coming in with your coffee, right? You want to make sure you're there, you're prepared for the day. Being engaged, again, minimizing distractions, putting your phone away, and reflection. Oh my gosh. So I will say, as a student teacher, I did not like reflecting on my lessons. Like, there's one more thing I have to do. I already taught it. It was amazing. It was not amazing, but yeah, I'm like, it was amazing. You're going to find glows and grows in that lesson that you taught, even if you think maybe it was not the best lesson, or you planned the most amazing lesson and it did not go the way that you planned it. That is okay. You're going to learn something from that experience. You're also going to learn something from an experience when a lesson goes beautifully and you have all the stars aligned in your lesson, like, yes, I did it. So reflect often. And what I mean by that is after you're done teaching your lesson, if you have some time between classes, or both students are moving from one class to another, or maybe they're moving from one activity to another, grab a sticky note and jot down, okay, here here's something that I wanted to improve upon, put an I, write something improve upon, put a G for a glow, and write something that you did really well. Maybe you remembered all the students' names by week 2, which is awesome. You called them all by name and it was correct. Fantastic. Improve upon, maybe you want to improve upon student grouping. And maybe you don't want to pair up those 2 students that you did because they talked a lot. So, and then going back after you've jotted those quick things down, at the end of the day, doing a more better debrief with your cooperating teacher regarding that lesson that you taught, because they're going to be able to pull out some things that maybe you didn't notice that you did really well with, and some things that can be improved upon. So next time you teach, you're going to go back to those grows. What are some areas I need to do better in? And you're going to implement that into your next lesson. So as a supervisor, when I'm looking at going in for like observation 2, I'll go back to my observation 1 notes and look to see, okay, this student needed some support with classroom management, student behavior, and assessment. So I'll make sure that before I go see them for observation 2, I'll remind them, hey, remember during observation 1, we talked about these 3 areas. I'm looking for improvement in these areas when I come in for observation 2. But you can do that yourself. You can go ahead and look at the feedback from your co-op, from your student teacher supervisor, and look to see, okay, here are some areas that I need to improve upon. And then use that like kind of as your student teaching superpower to always always remember to reflect. I'm sorry, I'm giggling because I opened up the chat and Kayla, yes, that's kind of what I was going for. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, you want to make sure everything's covered whenever you're dressing professionally. And I know as young women, we like to wear leggings with tops or dresses. Just make sure everything's covered if you're going to wear leggings. And on jeans day, sometimes there's jeans days whenever you're a student teaching. I always encourage my student teachers to participate in Jeans Day, pay the dollar, wear your jeans because you're engaging in that professional community. But it really, I would have the conversation with your cooperating teacher and your college supervisor if it's okay if you wear jeans on the Friday that they're allowing you to wear jeans. Just making sure. I also recommend. I also tell my student teachers participate in those. What are the days where they dress silly or like they'll dress like all monochrome or like sports a sports team. I don't know. Maybe somebody will know what I'm talking about in the chat. Spirit days. Thank you, Erica. Yes, spirit days. Participate in those. I actually had a student teacher I was observing during a spirit day. She texted me the morning and she goes, I just want to warn you, I'm dressed for spirit day. I'm like, it is great. I'm excited that you're dressed for spirit day. So participate in those types of things. I think that's really cool. All right, so let's talk about communication. Communicating expectations, goals, and resources provided by your university. When you are student teaching, it really is like a 3-legged stool. We have our student teacher, we have our cooperating teacher or mentor teacher, and we have our student teacher supervisor. We're all there to help support and help you grow as the educator of excellence that you are. And some ways to do that, excuse me, some ways to do that is to set clear goals for yourself so you're able to relay what those goals are and relay what those expectations are for yourself. And then what are the expectations you have for your cooperating teacher and university supervisor? So let's start with university supervisor. So I will usually send out a little email to my students and I will say, hey, happy to meet you. I'm excited to see you teach. Here's some of the expectations that I have, and I'll list them out. For example, when I come and I see you student teach, I want to see exactly what lesson you are on. So when I come to observe, I like to see that. I do let my student teachers know ahead of time when I'm coming. Some supervisors do, some don't. That's something you'd have to discuss with your student teacher supervisor. You're also going to have to ask, or they might share how often they will be observing you. And if you will be conferencing after you teach. That's something I like to do with my student teachers. I like to see them teach, and then we'll go out in the hallway. We'll have a little chat about it, and then I'll send them my evaluation of how they did during that observation. So they have a copy, I have a copy, and I also send it to the cooperating teacher. And guess what? There's 3 copies of that observation, so they can go ahead and read through it. So understanding, are you going to be able to conference after you teach? How often will they be there? What are their expectations when they come to see you? What do they want to see ready to go? And then understanding that there might be additional assignments that go along with student teaching besides just turning in lesson plans, right? You're going to want to know, when do I turn in my lesson plan? Where does it go? What time does it need to be turned in by? For some of you, your cooperating teacher, or they're going to want your lesson plan 4 o'clock on Friday, the week before you teach your content. For others, it's going to be like, 24 hours before you teach it. So that's something that you need to have discussed with your cooperating teacher and your university supervisor. Your university supervisor might not even want your lesson plans unless they're coming to observe you that day. So thinking about what's going to be turned in, when, and where. Some other additional assignments that you might have for student teaching might be observing other teachers in the building, maybe observing a special ed teacher, observing a specialist, those types of things. You might have to sit in on an IEP meeting, volunteer or attend an outside of school event. Trying to think. I have one that's like write your student teacher letter, meet the student teacher letter. That's one of my assignments I have my students do. So depending on who your supervisor is, you might have other things to do in addition to lesson plans and unit plans and all the plans. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about, I'll go back one and check the chat. Maybe there was a question in there. Oh yes, Jean's Day is a thing. What do the evaluations look like? So for Kayla, I'm assuming you mean like the university supervisor evaluation. Okay, so it's all going to depend on what your where your university is and what their evaluation process is. So that would be something you would discuss with your supervisor. For us in Pennsylvania, it is based on the Danielson framework for teaching. So there's 22 components, and we evaluate across those 4 components. Granted, whenever we're going in for an observation, we might not see all the things that's listed in the Danielson framework. We just put not observed. But I like to go in and I'll jot down things about lesson planning, alignment from objectives to standards to procedure to assessment and reflection. So I'll look for alignment there. I always like to ask my students, what were your objectives and how do you know they were met? So whenever we're meeting and conferencing, I'll always ask that question. And what's interesting is, can they name the objectives? Do they know what they taught? And how do they know their students got it? Do they know which students got it? And if they need to reteach anything, do they need to pull anyone in the small group next time they go in and work with students on that? So it really all, going back to your evaluation question, it really all depends on what your college or university uses. For us, it's the Danielson framework. So I look for planning. For instruction, I look for engagement, student engagement. Are they engaged in learning? Are they not just being compliant, but are they really engaged in that learning process? Are they being assessed on what you've taught them? So just a few things there. I hope that helps, Kayla. Sorry, it's kind of vague because it depends on where you are. All right, let's keep going. And I'll head back to the chat in just a few minutes here. So let's talk about building relationships with students, colleagues, and support staff. So I think building relationships with students is probably the most easiest, the most exciting one that we want to do, right? But like, let's get in there. Let's high five all the students. We want to get that Instagram video of us having like the high five, the fist bump, or like, I don't know, whatever else they do on that list of things. But greeting them at the door, it really, really, really goes a long way when we greet them at the door. Starting to have those conversations with them, like in the hallways or during special, or as you're taking them down to different events or going down to the cafeteria or going to assemblies, asking students how they're doing, what's going on, just checking in with them, being curious about them. I interviewed someone on my podcast named Lavana Roth, and she shared this strategy called noticing, and how just noticing students really goes a long way. Like, hey, I noticed you are wearing a Steelers jersey and from Pennsylvania. Who's your favorite player? And I noticed that you play hockey for the school. That's awesome. What position do you play? Those types of things. As they exit, let them feel valued and appreciated for coming into class, because you know what it's like to go into a classroom where you feel welcome, supported, and valued as an individual. You want your students to feel the same way when they enter and when they exit that classroom space. So maybe that's ending on a positive note. So giving them like an encouraging word, or just high-fiving them as they exit the door, or as they're handing in their exit ticket, like, yeah, nice job. You did a great job participating today. I loved your question. Just engaging in that type of way. And you can also create a meet the student teacher letter that kind of goes to several different audiences. So one would be your cooperating teacher, one would be to the principal, very similar language, and then one could be to families and students. So before you send anything home, though, to families or students, you want it to be okayed by your cooperating teacher. That's pretty important. And on your Meet the Student Teacher letter, if that's something you'd like to create, making sure when you send it home for families and students, you do not have your personal email or cell phone or Instagram or any type of contact information on that, because they will find you and they will try to be friends with you. So protect yourself in that way. Cooperating teacher, start and stay professional. So show up as the professional educator that you are. Continue to engage and focus in on student teaching. This is your job for the next 8, 10, 16 weeks that you are in this placement. So stay curious and ask those questions. If you notice something, ask those questions to your cooperating teacher. Making sure that you keep the lines of communication open between your cooperating teacher and your university supervisor, whether that is if your university supervisor has like Zoom office hours, attending those, or emailing them a quick question, or sending them a text, however they prefer to communicate, asking those questions and keeping those lines open. I always like to text my student teachers on Friday, yay, it's Friday, have a great day, or something like that, just to say, I'm opening the window if you want to chat or if you have any questions or comments. Stay open to feedback. It's our job to help support you. And it's our job when we sign off on our paperwork that you are ready to go to be a first year teacher. So stay open to that feedback. We're not saying it to criticize. We're saying it to help support you. So there's going to be constructive criticism. So really think about the way that we're providing that feedback and incorporating that into your next lessons whenever we come and observe for the next few times. Being open to feedback from your cooperating teacher. I know sometimes it can get a little, I know sometimes it can get maybe a little hairy sometimes when we talk to our cooperating teachers and there's some miscommunication or maybe there's some friction. Clear the air as soon as possible. It's going to help everybody with their stress and just make it more of a enjoyable experience. It's as a supervisor, you go into classrooms and you see amazing educators. And it's a great experience for student teachers. For some, it's not so much a great experience, but you're going to learn something from that. Whenever I was a student teacher, I had 2 placements. One was in regular ed, one was in special ed, and had a fantastic special ed placement. My regular ed placement was not all that great. I had a co-op who didn't really want to do too much outside of just doing worksheets in the textbook. So I really worked alongside my supervisor, and I was like, oh, my supervisor wants me to try something other than worksheets. Well, okay. So we did, and it worked out well. So sometimes you can have those conversations with your supervisor, like, hey, I really want to try this. Can you help support me with this? We kind of want to break out of the worksheet mold. Okay. And then support staff. So if you're in a special ed placement, you're going to have support staff, maybe personal care aides or classroom assistants. So that really depends there. So make sure you introduce yourself. And might be a little bit difficult to start forming those relationships because sometimes they might be older than you. They might be just graduated out of college as support staff. So make sure you introduce yourself and you have conversations with them. You just don't tell them what to do because they have a history with students. You want to ask, how they support students. You want to ask what their role is. What are they, what types of things they can do for the classroom. So and start to build those relationships with support staff as well. And then also going in and observing other professionals. We talked about that earlier, whether it's special ed or it's some sort of specialist, or maybe it's like we call them the specials classes with like art, music, computers, a library, like those types of classes, going and observing those. Because when your students are in different environments, there would be different classroom management techniques that you can observe. And then my last one here, I know it's a very small bullet point, but introduce yourself to the principal. This goes such a long way. So when you go in, that doesn't have to be the first day, maybe the second day, you're a little brave, you got one day under your belt. Don't just go in with your head down, going right to your classroom. Stop by, say hi to the principal, introduce yourself, thank them for letting you be a student teacher in their class, in their school, in their building, let them know who you're working with. I even had a student teacher one year, and this was like 6 years ago, who shared that he was doing a lesson and he was trying a whole new technique. He's never tried this technique before. It was called a breakout EDU, where you set up like it's like an escape room. So he tried that. And he's like, Dr. Fessich, I want you to come and observe this. But you know what? I also invited the principal just because. Like, oh, okay, great. So the principal came and observed him. I came to observe him, and the cooperating teacher was observing as well. And he got three lenses of feedback, and the lesson was awesome. It was so much fun to see. He was having a great time. The students were learning, and they didn't really know they were learning because they were unlocking boxes and finding all these clues and solving all these mysteries. But at the end, he reached all of his objectives. His instructional strategies were engaging. His assessment was spot on, and he was actually offered a long-term sub position after having the principal come and observe him, which was really cool. So you never know where an introduction might take you. Okay, so let's keep going here. So lesson planning and instructional strategies. So for a lot of us, we might have our curriculum digitally or the text digitally. If you can get access to that, awesome sauce. If you can get access to the teacher's Google Classroom or their LMS, if you can get put in like as a guest teacher into the LMS or as a access or a guest access account to the digital text, that would be fantastic. So you always have it with you. If not, hopefully there's another extra copy that the teacher can provide you. Or, I mean, the third option would be making copies of the pieces that you're teaching that day. So you're not making a copy of the entire textbook, but just maybe pages 110 to 130 because that's what your lesson's focused on. It'd be ideal if you can get the entire text, either digitally or physical copies, so you know what the students have already learned and where they're going in their learning. So thinking about how you're going to plan your curriculum and planning out your lesson with your cooperating teacher. Maybe you want to do some sort of like mini lessons or like a very quick intro to the topic with maybe it's more like a 10-minute lesson, like a 10-minute little mini lesson where it gets the students excited about the topic. And then you go into more detail the next day. You want to look at your university and your cooperating teachers' standards for their content area, but you also want to look at their standards for lesson planning. So you want to make sure you have a template of that lesson plan format, so you're not retyping it all the time. You have one template lesson plan, you just keep making copies of that, and you're filling in the information as you go. So make sure you have a template of a full lesson plan document from your university or from your co-op, whichever one your university tells you to use, that's what you use. You would have a full lesson plan template, a mini lesson template, a weekly template block if you're in a blocking placement unit plan template. So making sure you have all the templates ready to go and saved into one of your folders. You don't have to worry about searching on email or anywhere else. It's just all in one spot. Bookmarking your resources that are available to you as a student teacher, whether that is like your teacher uses Nearpod all the time or Google Classroom or I don't know, Code Lab, whatever it might be. You have all those resources bookmarked and you've played around with them. If you're not familiar with them, get familiar with them because you're going to be expected to use them and to learn about them. Access to the learning management system, we already talked about that. And then when you're reflecting on your lesson, reflect in a way that's going to make you want to do it and go back to it. So whether, like I mentioned before, the quick post-it note strategy and then going into more detail, or maybe I like to record stuff. So maybe you're more of an audio person and just recording a quick audio, then you can have it transcribed. You can do that. But thinking about what's a meaningful reflection for you and then being able to revisit that. So whenever you teach again, you have that reflection of things that went well, things that could go better. That's pretty much what it is. And you want to make sure that you're just continuing to grow a little bit at a time. Remember, you're not expected to be perfect day one. When you are co-planning with your cooperating or mentor teacher, Coming up with a plan or a strategy is really helpful. I once had a cooperating teacher who had everything laid out as to with dates and what the student teacher would be taking over each week. So week one, they were doing morning meeting and intervention time. Week two, they're doing morning meeting, intervention time, and like a 20-minute literacy lesson. And then each week it continued to build and build and build until she was done. She was teaching the entire last 2 or 3 weeks on her own. And depending on your university and state requirements, you are required to teach, you may be required to teach a full day for a certain amount of days. That would be a question you would have for your university or college supervisor. So an example would be I have here like for the first half of week one, depending on when it starts, you would observe for 2 or 3 days and then maybe take on something small, like a small group or a morning meeting or intervention time or whatever it might be. So maybe you're taking over a little bit there, getting in front of students, walking around, helping with individual students as they have questions. Maybe it's more of a one teach, one assist type model in co-teaching if you're thinking about that. Week two, maybe you're teaching 2 lessons, and that does not mean like 2 full-blown math lessons. Maybe that's a math lesson and a reading. So thinking about what are some ways you continue to grow that catalog of courses that you're teaching. You want to make sure that you are meeting the requirements of both university and your cooperating teacher, whatever those might be, for reflection, for turning in content. And then it's also important to share this information with your co-op and have that conversation for the goals that you have and the expectations you have for teaching. Like, it's required that I teach for 2 full weeks. Here's a plan. Can we discuss a plan on how I can get there to help that supports you and help supports the goals of the university and so I can get certified, something like that. So they're aware, oh, I didn't know they had to teach 2 full weeks. Well, yeah. So let's talk about how I can get there. How are we doing so far? We have about, let's see, we have about 5 minutes left. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Allie. And I'll get back to that question that was posted in just a minute here. Okay. So well, a few more things about co-planning, and then we'll hop into our um, end of our session survey. So I was trying to think of the word polls, but it wasn't coming to me. So when we're co-planning, making sure that you know your content, you know what they know before, and you know what where they're going as a result of your content. So what's the goal of learning? So you really know that your content area, you know that lesson, you've reviewed if you're doing a presentation, if you have slides, you reviewed it multiple times, you've read it aloud, you've had others read it, so you don't want to have mistakes on there. You want to make sure that you're passionate about your topic. Now, you may not be super passionate about multiplying fractions, but your enthusiasm will be contagious for other students. So make sure that you're excited about it and that you want to be there. I encourage you to go beyond the textbook. I mean, there's so much you can do to engage students using educational technology. And there's a few here. KDP has wonderful resources on their blog. Edutopia has wonderful resources there. And don't forget about the basics. I think we can often get really into like, how am I going to teach this? What are some cool ways I can have students engage with this? Don't forget about the basics. Don't forget that anticipatory set. If you can link that anticipatory set to your conclusion or your ending statement, awesome. Make sure at the end, you kind of tie the bow on the learning review. Okay, here are things that we did. Oh yeah, we did talk about that. So having something for them to kind of, seal the envelope, so to speak. Making sure that everything is aligned, objectives, standards, procedures, and assessment. Those are the 4 things that I look for in alignment, because you want to make sure that you're assessing what you're actually teaching and that your teaching is aligned to those objectives and standards. And lesson planning is a process. It is very valuable for you to go through the lesson planning process from start to finish for each of the new content pieces that you're picking up. You should not be block planning by week 3. You should not be weekly planning by week 3. Really thinking about how you can engage in that lesson planning process. And then maybe after the midterm evaluation, thinking about weekly plan, and then maybe around week 10 or 12, thinking about block plan. So really engage with that planning process. So that's why it's so important to have those templates available. All right, so I want to thank you guys for joining us for our first session tonight. We talked about building relationships, setting those goals, setting expectations, professionalism, how to stand out during student teaching, lesson planning and co-planning type strategies, how to have those conversations with our co-ops. So I'm going to go ahead and launch our poll. Um, Let me go ahead and do that. Polls back. And when we have 75%, I will share a bonus tip with y'all. So let me go ahead and get that up and running. I think it is. Awesome. We got 20% already. Fantastic. So the bonus I want to share with you, I'm going to tease it a little bit. It's just a labor of love. It's something I create every semester for my student teachers. So I like to share it with all. It's something I actually charge for on my TPT store, but for coming tonight, you guys can have it for free. It is a student teacher planner for spring 2025. This planner has everything we talked about: spots for lesson planning, spots for your supervisor evaluations, your mentor teacher evaluations, lesson planning at a glance, student data information. It has calendars monthly, weekly, daily, and that Michelle will attest is a labor of love figuring out all the numbers and the calendar and stuff that goes along with it. It also has 16 weeks of reflection prompts to be thinking about throughout your student teaching. And we have 84%. I'm going to go ahead and click to that next slide, and you guys can scan the code and it'll take you to a Canva template doc. And there you can go ahead and you can download it as a template. You can download the PDF. You can print it if you want. You can use it digitally if you want, whatever floats your boat. So this is a really fun project. I really enjoy doing it, and I hope you all enjoy it as well. It is full of stuff that's going to help you get more organized and feel prepared for student teaching. All right, let's go ahead and look at any questions, comments, concerns. And go ahead and hop into the chat. Oh, thank you so much for the feedback. I appreciate it. Yeah, I like how Kayla shared about keeping accounts private. Yes, yes, yes. And Raven, thanks for reminding us. We have our next session next week at 5 o'clock. Thank you, Erica, for stopping by. All right, and I have 6 o'clock on my phone. Thank you so much for being here. Have a wonderful night, and I'll see y'all next week. Bye for now.